Beneath the indifferent gaze of a fractured moon, a single flake of snow carried the weight of unspoken destinies, falling like a tear upon the frozen earth. Oreth Vale had always been the shadow in the pack's firelight, her form unyielding to the wild call that twisted others into beasts under the lunar pull. Born to the Frostfang clan in the jagged embrace of the Ironspine Mountains, she was meant to shift with the first blood moon, her omega essence blooming into fur and fang like the rest. But the night came and went, the winds howling their mockery through the pine-shrouded valleys, and Oreth remained unchanged, human, fragile, a defect etched into the clan's lore like a scar that refused to heal. The elders whispered of curses, their eyes narrowing at the faint golden thread that traced her collarbone, a birthmark no healer could explain. It gleamed dully in the torchlight of the great hall, a mockery of the silver scars that marked true shifters. Broken, they called her, the word slithering through the pack like venom in the veins. Her father, once a beta of renown, turned his back first, his howls of grief echoing into silence as he mated anew with a fertile she-wolf who birthed pups that shifted on their first full moon. Her mother, gone too soon to the fever that claimed her after Oreth's birth, had pressed a small moonstone pendant into her daughter's hand, a cool, unyielding stone veined with whispers of gold. "It will awaken when the time is right," she had murmured, her breath fogging the air like a dying fire. But the pendant hung cold against Oreth's chest, as inert as her dormant wolf. Years blurred into a tapestry of endurance, the clan's tolerance fraying like rope in the relentless wind. Oreth learned to fade into the background, her hands calloused from tending the hearths and mending hides, her voice a soft murmur amid the raucous feasts where alphas boasted of hunts and omegas preened in their shifted glory. She felt the pull of the moon in her bones, a distant ache like the echo of a song she could never sing. But her body betrayed her every solstice, every ritual circle where the pack danced under the stars, bodies contorting in ecstatic release while she knelt alone, the snow seeping through her threadbare cloak. The breaking came on the eve of the winter conclave, when the kingdom's spiritual veil thinned and the Deuce's light was said to pierce the darkest souls. The Alpha King, Thorn Blackthorn, had not graced their borders in years. Rumors swirled of his exile in the shadowed east, haunted by a betrayal that left his once mighty realm crumbling under rival packs. But his decree arrived like a blizzard. The Frostfangs must purge their weaknesses to reclaim the sacred bond with the moon spirits. Purity, it demanded, or oblivion. In the heart of the clan's ice-carved longhouse, flames crackled in the central pit, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters on the frost-rimed walls. The air was thick with the scent of pine resin and fresh blood from the ritual kill, a stag's heart still steaming on the altar. Oreth stood at the periphery, her dark hair matted with snow from the trek back from the outer herds, her breath visible in the chill that no fire could fully banish. The pack gathered, their eyes gleaming with feral anticipation, furred pelts draped over shoulders that bore the proud marks of shifts. Beta Harlan, her father's successor and the pack's enforcer, stepped forward, his voice a gravelly rumble that cut through the murmurs. "The Deuce demands strength," he intoned, his gaze locking on Oreth like a predator sighting prey. "We cannot carry the dead weight into the trials ahead. Oreth Vale, the unshifted, the broken Omega, you are no longer of the Frostfangs." A hush fell, broken only by the wind's mournful sigh against the timbers. Oreth's heart pounded, a wild drum in her chest, but she lifted her chin, the golden thread on her skin catching a stray flicker from the fire. "I have served," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. "I have mended your wounds, kept your fires burning through the long nights. Is loyalty not strength?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, sharp as shattered ice. A young alpha, Eric, son of the pack's seer, spat at her feet. "Loyalty from a half-breed? You mock the moon with your stillness? The spirits turn from us because of you." His words ignited the others. Growls rose, a chorus of rejection that pressed against her like the mountain's unyielding stone. Harlan raised a hand, silencing them, but his eyes held no mercy, only the cold calculus of survival. "The king's law is clear. You will be cast out at dawn, left to the wilds beyond the Whispering Pass. If the Dusa wills it, perhaps your blood will call forth something worthy before the wolves claim you." The night stretched into agony, the pack dispersing to their dens, while Orith was bound loosely in the outer pen, the snow drifting in soft veils that numbed her skin. She clutched the moonstone pendant, its surface smooth under her frozen fingers, willing it to warm, to pulse with the life her body denied her. The wind carried distant weavos from the forest's edge, hunters or harbingers, she could not tell. Above, the moon hung low, its light fractured by clouds, spilling silver over the peaks like spilled blood on snow. As the first gray light pierced the horizon, they came for her. Harlan himself cut the ropes, his touch brusque, avoiding her eyes. "Go swiftly," he muttered, almost a kindness, before turning away. The pass loomed ahead, a narrow defile choked with drifts and shadowed by looming crags, where blizzards had swallowed travelers whole. Orith stepped into the gale, the cold slicing through her like fangs, her boots crunching over ice that hid treacherous crevasses. Hours bled into a haze of exhaustion, her breath ragged. The golden thread on her collarbone, a faint warmth against the encroaching freeze. She stumbled into a hollow, a shallow cave mouth veiled by icicles, and collapsed against the wall, the pendant slipping from her grasp to clatter on the stone. In the dimness, she traced the mark on her skin, wondering if the Dusa had forsaken her entirely, or if this silence was the curse's cruelest form. But as the wind howled its dirge, a deeper tremor stirred in the earth, faint as a heartbeat, echoing the unrest that plagued the kingdom. Far beyond the mountains, the Alpha King's shadow lengthened, his guilt a chain heavier than any exile. And in the quiet of her despair, Orith felt for the first time a spark, not of fury, but of something ancient, waiting to be born from the frost's unyielding grip. The wind clawed at the cave's mouth like a beast denied its kill, whipping snow into a frenzy that blurred the line between sky and stone. Orith huddled deeper into the hollow, her body a knot of shivers, the cold seeping into her marrow like the pack's disdain had seeped into her soul. The moonstone pendant lay beside her on the rough floor, its surface catching faint glimmers from the dying light outside, a silent sentinel, mocking her with its unyielding chill. She pressed her palm to the golden thread tracing her collarbone, the mark that had branded her as other, as incomplete. It pulsed faintly now, a warmth like embers buried in ash, but she dismissed it as delusion, born of the frost's cruel bite. Hours blurred into a numb vigil, the distant weavos of wolves threading through the gale like threads in a loom of fate. She dozed fitfully, dreams haunted by the longhouse's fire and the stag's steaming heart, her own pulse a weak echo against the mountain's roar. Then a sound pierced the storm, not the wind's howl, but a ragged breath, human yet laced with something primal, stumbling against the ice-veiled entrance. Orith's eyes snapped open, her heart slamming like a war drum in the silence. She shrank back, fingers scrabbling for a loose stone as makeshift weapon, the cave's shadows her only ally. The figure that emerged was no mere wanderer. He collapsed just inside the threshold, a tower of a man cloaked in tattered furs, stained with blood and mud, his broad frame heaving with exhaustion. Silver hair, matted and wild, framed a face carved from the mountains themselves, high cheekbones etched with lines of old sorrow, eyes the color of storm-tossed seas, flickering with a pain that went beyond flesh. He was Alpha. She knew it in the marrow of her unshifted bones, the air thickening with his scent, pine smoke, iron blood, and the faint, metallic tang of ancient oaths broken. Thorn Blackthorn, the exiled king whose name whispered through the clans like a curse. Legends spoke of his fall, a betrayal in the eastern shadows, where rival packs had torn at his throne, leaving him marked by guilt, his spirit chained to the ghosts of the fallen. Now, here he was, wounded. One arm clutched to his side where crimson bloomed through the rent leather, staining the snow at his feet like spilled wine under moonlight. Fear coiled in Orith's gut, sharp as the icicles overhead, but curiosity held her still. A moth drawn to the flame he carried within, despite the peril. She should flee, scream into the storm to summon the wild's mercy or the pack's wrath. Instead, she watched as he dragged himself upright, leaning against the wall with a grunt that echoed her own hidden fractures. His gaze found her in the dimness, piercing, assessing, not with the pack's contempt, but a weary recognition, as if he saw the echo of his own exile in her huddled form. "You," he rasped, voice like gravel under boot, laced with the authority of one born to command winds and wolves. This cave, claimed by the lost? Blood trickled from a gash above his brow, tracing a path down his temple, mirroring the golden thread on her skin in its deliberate path. He did not lunge or demand. Instead, he slid down the wall opposite her, eyes never leaving her face. The space between them charged with an instinctive pull she could not name, a thread tugging at her core, warm and insistent, like the moon's call she had never answered. Orith's breath caught, her body responding against her will, a flush beneath the chill, a softening in her limbs that spoke of Omega to Alpha, forbidden and feral. But she denied it, shoving the sensation down like embers under snow. He was the king who had decreed her kind's purge, the architect of purity that cast her out. Fear won the first round, her voice emerging small but steady. The lost claim, nothing here. The storm brought you, as it did me. Leave, before your blood draws the real beasts. Thorn's lips curved in a ghost of a smile, melancholic, shadowed by the weight of unseen crowns. The beasts are already upon us, girl. Rivals from the shadow claws, traitors who hunt the fallen king through these passes. He pressed a hand to his wound, wincing, the metallic scent sharpening, mingling with the cave's damp earth. Outside, the wind carried a faint, answering howl, pursuers closing in like the noose of destiny. His eyes, those deep blues, held hers, and in that gaze she glimpsed the guilt that hollowed him. Visions of burned villages, betrayed mates, a realm fracturing under his duty's blade. Instinct urged her forward, to tend, to heal, as she had for the pack that spurned her, but curiosity twisted it into wariness. Why him? Why now, in this frozen limbo? She edged closer despite herself, the golden thread on her collarbone warming further, the pendant on the ground seeming to hum faintly, as if awakening to his presence. "You're Thorn Blackthorn," she whispered, the name tasting like blood on her tongue. "The one who demands strength from the weak. What makes you think I'd shelter a ghost?" He chuckled lowly, the sound raw, pulling at something deep within her, a curiosity blooming amid the fear, like moonlight piercing storm clouds. "Strength? It's a lie we tell the packs to keep the chaos at bay. I've chased it across these mountains, only to find it's forged in the quiet endurance of the overlooked." His words hung between them, philosophical embers in the cold, challenging her denial. The connection stirred again, instinctive, a spark of empathy for his broken royalty, mirroring her own shattered worth. Yet she resisted, rationalizing it as survival's trick, the storm's illusion. As thunder rumbled through the peaks, shaking loose a cascade of snow from the entrance, Thorn's hand brushed hers in the dim light, accidental, electric. She jerked back, heart racing. The pendant now clutched in her fist, its stone finally warming against her skin. Outside, shadows moved in the blizzard's veil, hunters' eyes glinting like distant stars. The cave, once her solitude, now cradled two exiles bound by the night's unyielding gaze. And now I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The storm's fury battered the cave like the wrath of forgotten gods, sealing the entrance in a shroud of swirling white that muffled the world beyond. Orith's pulse thrummed in her ears, a frantic rhythm against the stone at her back, as Thorn's presence filled the narrow space, his labored breaths syncing with the wind's savage inhalations. The golden thread along her collarbone burned now, an insistent heat that spread through her veins like liquid sunlight, defying the encroaching freeze. She clutched the moonstone pendant tighter, its surface no longer cold but thrumming with a subtle vibration, as if it recognized the alpha's blood scent mingling with the damp earth. Thorn shifted against the opposite wall, his massive frame coiled like a spring wound too tight, eyes scanning the veiled mouth of the cave. Blood seeped steadily from the gash at his side, pooling in the hollows of the floor, its coppery tang sharp enough to taste on the air. "They're close," he murmured, voice low and edged with the gravel of pain, yet carrying the unyielding timbre of command. "Shadow claws, feral bastards, loyal to no crown but their own greed. They scented my trail at the pass's edge. If they find this hollow—" He trailed off, his storm-blue gaze flicking to her, not with demand, but a quiet plea woven into the lines of his face, etched deep by years of solitary hunts and heavier burdens. Orith's throat tightened, fear coiling like frost in her chest. She was no warrior, no shifter with claws to rend or fangs to bear. She was the broken one, cast out for her stillness. Yet here, in this shared limbo, his vulnerability mirrored her own, a king reduced to a bleeding shadow, seeking refuge in the lair of the discarded. Empathy stirred unbidden, a soft ache blooming beneath the wariness, urging her to move. Rationalizing it as mere survival, she tore a strip from her cloak's hem, the fabric whispering as it gave way. "Let me see the wound," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, crawling forward on knees that scraped the rough stone. The space between them shrank, charged with that instinctive pull, warm and treacherous, like the first thaw in eternal winter. He hesitated, pride flickering in his eyes like dying embers. But necessity won. Lifting his arm, he exposed the laceration, a jagged tear from claw or blade, muscle parted beneath rent leather. Orith's hands trembled as she pressed the cloth against it, staunching the flow. His skin was fever-hot under her touch, the contact sending a jolt through her, electric and intimate. Up close, the scars mapping his torso told tales of battles long past, silvered lines from silvered blades, a constellation of guilt he wore like a crown of thorns. "Why run to these mountains?" she asked, focusing on the task to ignore the way her body leaned into the proximity, drawn by the subtle bond of Omega to Alpha, denied yet undeniable. "Your kingdom lies east, in the shadowed vales. The frost fangs are but a splinter in your realm's decay." Thorn's breath hitched as she bound the makeshift bandage, his free hand hovering near hers, not touching, but close enough to feel the heat. "Decay I wrought," he confessed, the words heavy, laced with the melancholy of a man who had stared too long into the abyss of his choices. "I sought purity to mend the fractures, purged the weak to forge unity against the encroaching dark. But in my zeal, I shattered more than I saved. Villages burned, loyalties bled out. The Shadow Claws were once allies, now they hunt me for the throne I can no longer hold." His gaze softened on her face, tracing the golden thread that gleamed faintly in the cave's gloom. "And you? Cast out by my decree, yet you tend the hand that signed your exile. Why?" The question pierced her, stirring the embers of resentment into a quiet flame. She tied off the cloth with a sharp tug, meeting his eyes, those depths holding storms she recognized in her own soul. "Because mercy is not weakness," she replied, echoing the philosophy her mother had whispered in fevered nights. "It's the choice that defies the pack's howl. I've endured their scorn, bandaged their pride. If the Dayusa meant for me to wither alone, she would not have led you here." The words surprised her, born from the empathy uncoiling within, transforming fear into something tentative, a bridge across the chasm of their wounds. The pendant in her fist warmed further, its hum syncing with her heartbeat, as if the stone itself approved this fragile alliance. Outside, the wind's roar crescendoed into a snarl, and then silence. A heavy silence, broken by the crunch of paws on snow, deliberate and circling. Oreth froze, her body pressing instinctively closer to Thorn's. The cave's confines no longer sanctuary, but trap. He tensed, rising to a crouch with a suppressed groan, drawing a short blade from his boot, dull but deadly in practiced hands. "Stay low," he whispered, positioning himself between her and the entrance, his form a bulwark of muscle and resolve. The air thickened with the intruder's scent, musk and malice, laced with the rot of betrayal. Shadows elongated through the snow veil. 3 figures emerging like specters, Shadowclaw's scouts, their furred cloaks blending with the storm, eyes glowing amber in the dim. The lead one, a scarred brute with a notched ear, snarled, "The king's blood ends here, in the Frostfang's frozen gut." His companions flanked him, claws extended, the blizzard parting just enough to reveal bared fangs. Thorn lunged without hesitation, blade flashing in an arc that caught the first scout's arm, drawing a spray of blood that steamed on the cold stone. The cave erupted into chaos, grunts and clashes echoing off the walls, the confined space turning the fight visceral, intimate. Oreth scrambled back, heart pounding, but inaction burned. She grabbed a jagged rock, hurling it at the second assailant as he lunged for Thorn's flank. It struck true, staggering him, buying the king a moment to drive his blade home. The third scout barreled toward her, eyes locked on easy prey, but Thorn intercepted, tackling the beast to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. Blood slicked the floor, mingling with the snow drifting in, the metallic reek overwhelming. In the fray's blur, Oreth's hand found Thorn's arm, steadying him as he rose, the last scout fleeing into the storm with a yelp. They collapsed together against the wall, breaths ragged, bodies bruised but unbroken. His hand covered hers then, deliberate, the touch forging the bond from empathy's spark into something deeper, a shared pulse against the dying echoes of violence. The golden thread on her skin blazed, the pendant now hot in her grasp, whispering of revelations yet to come. In that moment, amid the blood and breath, Oreth felt the first true thaw, not love, but alliance, born of mutual shelter in the night's unyielding embrace. The storm howled on, but within the cave, 2 exiles had woven their fates tighter, the weight of unspoken destinies pressing like the moon's distant gaze. The cave's dim confines held their breaths like a secret too heavy to whisper. The storm's remnants dripping from the icicle-veiled entrance in rhythmic plinks that echoed the slowing cadence of Oreth's heart. Blood pooled in shallow crimson mirrors on the stone floor, reflecting fractured slivers of moonlight that pierced the gloom like hesitant fingers. Thorn's weight pressed against her side, his chest rising and falling in sync with hers, the heat of his body a stark counterpoint to the chill that clawed at the edges of their refuge. His hand lingered on hers, calloused fingers tracing the curve of her knuckles, not in possession, but in quiet gratitude, a tether forged in the crucible of shared peril. The golden thread along her collarbone throbbed with an insistent rhythm, syncing with the moonstone pendant now tucked against her chest, its warmth seeping into her skin like sunlight trapped in winter's grasp. Oreth pulled away first, the contact too raw, too revealing of the instinctive bond she still resisted. A pull that whispered of destinies intertwined, yet clashed with the scars of her rejection. She busied herself with the remnants of the fight, dragging the fallen scouts' cloaks to barricade the entrance further, the coarse fur heavy with the scent of musk and malice. Thorn watched her, his storm-blue eyes shadowed by exhaustion, but gleaming with a newfound clarity. "You fought like one born to the wild," he said softly, his voice a low rumble that stirred the air between them. "Not with claws, but with the precision of survival. The packs would call it weakness. I see mercy's edge." She met his gaze, the words stirring the embers of her guarded heart. Mercy, her mother's legacy, the quiet strength that had kept her alive amid the Frostfang's scorn. Yet as she knelt to rinse the blood from her hands in a trickle of meltwater seeping from the wall, a deeper tremor coursed through her. The golden thread ignited, not with warmth, but a fierce, golden light that bloomed beneath her skin, illuminating the cave's shadows like dawn breaking over snowfields. Orith gasped, clutching at her collarbone, the pendant vibrating against her palm as if alive, pulsing with an ancient rhythm that matched the distant thrum of the earth itself. "What sorcery is this?" Thorn murmured, rising to his knees beside her, his hand hovering near but not touching, reverence tempering the alpha's instinct to claim. The light spread, tendrils of gold weaving through her veins, visible beneath the translucent pallor of her skin. Not the feral shift of fur and fang, but something ethereal, luminous. Her body arched involuntarily, a soft cry escaping her lips as visions flooded her mind. The Deuce's form, radiant and unyielding, manifesting not in rage, but in silent endurance, a golden luna rising from the fractures of the world. The cave walls seemed to pulse with it, the stone humming, as if the mountain recognized its own hidden fire. Orith's eyes fluttered shut, the light enveloping her in a cocoon of warmth that banished the cold, her form shimmering as ethereal wings of gold unfurled, not physical, but spectral, like auroras dancing under the moon. She felt it then, the dormant gift awakening, not the beast within, but the Pathfinder's essence, a bridge to the spiritual veil that shrouded the kingdom's decay. Whispers of the Deusa filled her ears, fragments of prophecy, visions of fractured packs reuniting under a light born of the overlooked, healing the wounds of betrayal with threads of gold rather than blades of steel. Her hands glowed as she reached out instinctively, and the blood on the floor stirred, not congealing but transforming, the crimson fading to a soft, healing shimmer that sealed the scouts' abandoned wounds on the cloaks, mending leather and fur as if time itself rewound. Thorn recoiled at first, awe etching his features, the melancholy lines of his face softening into wonder. He had chased legends across the shadowed east, tales of a golden redeemer who would mend the spiritual rift his purges had widened, restoring the moon's favor to a realm teetering on oblivion. But this unshifted Omega, cast out by his own decree, was no myth. She was the key, her light piercing the guilt that chained him, revealing paths he had long forsaken. "The Deuce's mark," he breathed, his voice thick with realization, fingers brushing the golden thread now blazing like a forge's heart. "The Pathfinder. Legends spoke of one who shifts not to beast, but to light, a golden luna to guide the lost kings back from exile. I sought her in temples and battlefields, blind to the truth. She hides in the broken, waiting for the moment of true need." The light receded slowly, leaving Orith trembling, her body spent, but alive with a newfound clarity. She opened her eyes to his, seeing not the exiled king, but the man beneath, the ethical core riven by duty's blade, his guilt a mirror to her own shame. The bond between them deepened, no longer mere instinct, but a spiritual tether, pulling at her resolve. Yet doubt lingered, a shadow in her chest. This power, born of resistance, demanded she choose, embrace it, and bind her fate to his redemption, or retreat into the solitude that had shielded her for so long. "If I'm the key," she whispered, her voice raw, laced with the philosophy of her awakening. What lock do I open? Your throne, stained with the blood of the purged, or something greater, mercy over power? Thorn's hand found hers again, deliberate this time, his touch grounding the ethereal hum still echoing in her veins. Outside, the storm had quieted to a mournful wind, carrying weavos that spoke of gathering foes, the shadow claws rallying for vengeance. But within, the cave felt sacred, the moonstone pendant now a conduit, its gold veins pulsing in harmony with her mark. He leaned closer, the scent of blood and pine enveloping her, his breath warm against her temple. You open the path to rebirth, he said, melancholy yielding to quiet resolve. Not my crown, but the kingdom's soul. I've wielded strength as a weapon. You've shown it's born in choosing compassion amid the frost. The revelation hung between them, a fragile dawn in the perpetual night of their exiles. Oreth felt the weight of it, the Deusa's gaze upon her, urging her toward a destiny that transcended rejection, yet demanded she confront the moral chasm, heal the king who had condemned her kind, or let the light fade into the silence she knew too well. As the first true moonlight slanted through the cracks, gilding their forms in silver and gold, the distant howls grew nearer, a reminder that revelation was but the spark. The fire of choice awaited. The moonlight sliced through the cave's fractured veil like a blade of judgment, casting elongated shadows that danced across the blood-streaked stone, turning the sanctuary into a tribunal of frost and fate. Oreth's skin still hummed with the afterglow of her awakening, the golden thread along her collarbone a living ember, pulsing in rhythm with the moonstone pendant nestled against her heart. Its warmth anchored her amid the whirlwind of visions that lingered, whispers of the Deusa urging unity from the kingdom's splintered soul, threads of light weaving through the darkness of betrayal. Yet as Thorn's hand withdrew from hers, the weight of revelation settled into a heavier burden, one that demanded she step beyond the cave's fragile peace into the storm's unforgiving maw. We cannot hide forever, Thorn said, his voice a low thunder, etched with the melancholy resolve of a king who had long danced with shadows. He rose, testing the makeshift bandage she had bound, the fabric now stiff with dried blood, a stark reminder of the violence that bound them. His storm-blue eyes met hers, holding not command, but a shared vulnerability, the guilt in their depths mirroring the doubt coiling in her chest. The Shadow Claws will return with their alpha, Vargan, the traitor who twisted my purges into pyres of ambition, and your pack. The Frostfangs will sense the disturbance in the veil. They come for what they cast away, or to bury it deeper. Oreth's breath caught, the word pack a barb that tore at the scars of her exile. The Frostfangs, her father's turned back, Harlan's cold decree, Irik's mocking laughter, loomed in her mind like specters in the blizzard. She had fled their rejection, but now her light called them back, a beacon she could neither dim nor deny. Freedom whispered of solitude, of vanishing into the wilds where no bonds could chain her. Yet the tether to Thorn pulled insistently, a moral crossroads etched in gold. Forgive the architect of her pain, or wield her gift as a weapon against the hierarchies that had broken her. And if I choose to walk away, she murmured, rising to face him, the cave's chill nipping at her skin like accusatory fingers. Let your wars consume the thrones, while I fade into the snow. Is that not the Omega's liberty? Thorn's expression fractured, a flicker of pain crossing his features before the king's mask settled. Liberty is a hollow howl without purpose, he replied, philosophical weight in his tone, born of nights spent wrestling ghosts in eastern ruins. I've chased mine through blood and betrayal, only to find it leads back to the wounds I inflicted. Your light. It reveals the path I blinded myself to. But the choice is yours, Oreth. I am no conqueror here, merely a man seeking redemption's mercy. The wind outside shifted, carrying the distant clamor of howls, layered, urgent, a chorus of frostfangs mingling with the guttural snarls of shadowclaws. The mountain trembled faintly, as if the earth itself recoiled from the converging storms. Aurith clutched the pendant, its gold veins flaring beneath her fingers, urging her forward. They emerged from the cave into a world reborn in moonlight's harsh clarity. The blizzard had yielded to a crystalline night, snowfields glittering like shattered diamonds under the fractured moon, the iron-spine peaks looming as silent witnesses. The air bit deep, laced with the metallic tang of impending blood, and the first silhouettes crested the ridge, Harlan at the fore, flanked by Eric and a dozen Frostfang warriors, their pelts dusted white, eyes gleaming with feral suspicion. From the opposite flank, Vargan and his Shadowclaws descended, a pack of lean shadows with fur cloaks ragged from endless hunts. Their alpha, a hulking figure scarred from temple to jaw, his amber gaze locked on Thorn with predatory glee. "The fallen king and his stray," Vargan bellowed, voice echoing off the crags like cracking ice, his claws extended in the snow. "The Deuce's veil cracks because of you, Blackthorn. Your purges fed my rise. Now I'll claim your head and the Frostfang's allegiance, purging the weak once more." His pack fanned out, encircling the hollow, the moonlight catching the silver of their blades, turning the standoff into a tableau of ancient vendettas. Harlan's growl cut through, his enforcer's bulk shifting as he scented Aurith, recognition twisting his features into a snarl of disbelief. "The Broken One returns? The spirits mock us, Aurith Vale, unshifted filth, daring to stand among warriors?" Eric laughed, sharp and venomous, stepping forward with bared fangs. "She brings the king's curse upon us. Kill them both, Harlan, before her weakness dooms the clan." The air thickened with tension, packs poised on the knife's edge of clash, the wind whipping snow into veils that blurred loyalties. Thorn positioned himself before Aurith, blade drawn, his form a bastion of ethical steel, ready to fight not for conquest, but to shield the light he now saw as salvation. Yet Aurith felt the golden thread ignite, her body trembling as the Deuce's power surged, not in fury, but in radiant resolve. She stepped forward, the pendant blazing against her chest, and raised her hands. Golden light unfurled from her palms like auroral wings, weaving through the snow-choked air, illuminating the faces of friend and foe alike. Visions assailed them all, flashes of the kingdom's spiritual collapse, burned villages under Thorn's decrees, Frostfang rituals failing under Harlan's iron rule, Shadowclaw betrayals staining the moon red. The light pierced hearts, forcing truths, Aurith's endurance as the Deuce's chosen, not defect, but destiny. Thorn's guilt as the forge of true strength, Vargan's ambition as the rot devouring the packs. Warriors staggered, some dropping weapons, eyes wide with the weight of moral reckoning. "See the fractures you wrought?" Aurith's voice rang out, amplified by the ethereal glow, her words a philosophy carved in light. "Power built on rejection crumbles like frost under dawn. I offer not war, but healing, forgiveness for the past, if you choose compassion over conquest." Vargan lunged first, blade arcing toward her throat, but the light repelled him, coiling around his form like golden chains, forcing him to his knees amid visions of his own treacheries. Harlan hesitated, his gaze locking on Aurith's, the broken Omega who had mended his wounds in silence, now a luminous force. Eric snarled, charging Thorn, but the king parried with weary precision, disarming him without killing, a choice that echoed Aurith's plea. Blood spilled in the snow, not a river, but droplets. Vargan's arm gashed, Eric's pride shattered, yet the light mended as it judged, sealing wounds with threads of gold, turning crimson to shimmering peace. In the chaos's lull, Aurith faced Harlan, the pack's enforcer kneeling amid his warriors, the moonlight gilding his humbled form. "You cast me out for stillness," she said, voice intimate, laced with the tragedy of their shared history. "But strength is not in the shift. It's in choosing mercy when the howl demands blood. Tears traced her cheeks, freezing in the cold, as the dilemma tore at her. Forgive the pact that scarred her soul, binding her to Thorn's redemption and the kingdom's fragile unity, or unleash the light as retribution, claiming freedom in isolation's bitter embrace. Thorn's hand found her shoulder, a steadying warmth, his melancholic eyes reflecting her turmoil. "The choice defines us," he whispered, the bond between them a quiet fire amid the judgment's blaze. The Pax watched, breaths held, the moon above fracturing further as if awaiting her verdict, love's redemption or war's liberty, forgiveness or the wild unknown. In that suspended breath, Oreth felt the Deus's gaze, heavy with the weight of souls hanging in the balance, her heart a battlefield where compassion warred with the ghosts of rejection. The snow fell softer now, veiling the blood in white, but the ethical storm raged on within her, demanding a path forged not in fury, but in the silent resistance that had birthed her light. The snow fell in languid veils, each flake a fragile truce between the fractured moon and the bloodied earth below, as if the Deusa herself wept for the souls teetering on revelation's edge. Oreth stood at the heart of the frozen hollow, her form bathed in the ethereal afterglow of her golden light, which lingered like dawn's hesitant promise amid the iron-spine peaks. The air hummed with the pendant's pulse against her chest, its gold veins threading warmth through her veins, a counterpoint to the wind's icy lament that tugged at her cloak and stirred the warrior's furred pelts. Thorn remained at her side, his presence a steadfast shadow, melancholic eyes scanning the encircling Pax, his hand hovering near her elbow, not to command but to remind her of the bond that had pulled them from exile's solitude into this crucible of judgment. Harlan rose slowly from his knees, the enforcer's broad frame casting a long silhouette across the glittering snow, his face a mask cracked by the visions Oreth's light had forced upon him. The Frostfangs shifted uneasily behind him, their howls silenced into murmurs, eyes darting between their humbled leader and the luminous Omega they had branded broken. Eirik lay disarmed in the drifts, his youthful arrogance bled out in shallow cuts that the golden threads had already begun to mend, leaving him panting with the sting of unwelcome truth. Across the ridge, Vargan struggled against the ethereal chains coiling his limbs, his amber eyes blazing with fury that masked deeper fear. The traitor Alpha, whose ambitions had twisted Thorn's purges into rivers of flame, now confronted by the ghosts of villages he had raised for power's hollow crown. "You dare wield the Deuce's gaze against us?" Vargan snarled, his voice a guttural rumble that echoed off the crags, straining against the light that held him fast. Snow crunched under his boots as he twisted, claws scraping furrows in the white, but the golden aura repelled him, forcing visions to replay, his betrayal in the eastern shadows where he had whispered lies to Thorn's council, igniting the civil wars that fractured the kingdom's spiritual veil. This light is no salvation, it's a trick, a defect's delusion. The Pax thrive on strength, not your simpering mercy. Release me, and I'll show you true judgment, your king's head on a pike, and you, witch, buried in the pass you crawled from. Oreth's heart clenched, the words striking like Harlan's decree had years ago, reopening the wound of rejection that her power could not fully heal. She felt the pull of freedom then, sharp and seductive. The wild unknown beyond the Pack's reach, where she could let her light fade into silence, unburdened by the chains of forgiveness or the throne's decaying weight. Her fingers tightened around the pendant, its heat a whisper of the Deusa's query. What is redemption, if not the choice to heal what sought to destroy you? The golden thread on her collarbone flared, sending tendrils of light snaking toward Vargan, not to harm, but to illuminate further, drawing forth his confession in a choked gasp. I burned the border clans to claim the East, he admitted, the words tearing from him like thorns from flesh. his pack faltering as the truth rippled through their ranks, some dropping blades into the snow with clatters that pierced the night. Thorn stepped forward, his blade lowered but ready, the melancholic lines of his face deepening in the moonlight's silver wash. Guilt etched his every movement, a king who had wielded purity as a blade, only to see it turned against his realm. "Vargan," he said, voice steady, yet laced with the sorrow of old oaths broken. "Your ambition fed on my blindness. I decreed the purges to unite us against the dark, but they sowed the seeds of this rot. No more blood for thrones stained by our hands." His gaze flicked to Oreth, a silent plea woven into the ethical core that defined him. Redemption not as conquest, but as the mercy he had denied so many. The bond between them tugged, resisted no longer in full. She felt it now as a quiet acceptance, warm amid the cold, urging her toward love's proof over isolation's liberty. But Harlan's voice cut through, raw and unyielding, as he advanced a step, his enforcer's eyes locking on Oreth with a mix of awe and lingering scorn. "The Frostfangs cast you out for good reason, girl. Your stillness mocked our rituals, weakened the veil that shields us from the void. Now you return as this golden specter, demanding we bow to compassion? The Diusa favors the strong, shifts and hunts, not whispers in the snow." His warriors growled assent, a low chorus that stirred the wind into fresh flurries, but doubt flickered in their eyes, the light's visions lingering like frostbite on the soul. Eric struggled to his feet, bloodied but defiant, spitting crimson into the white. "She's no pathfinder, just a curse we should have ended at dawn. Harlan, lead us. War on the Shadow Claws, and purge this traitor king who brought her plague." The hollow tensed, packs shifting like predators in a standoff. The air thick with the scent of blood and pine, Weavos building in the distance as reinforcements crested distant ridges, shadows under the moon, drawn by the disturbance in the veil. Oreth's breath came in shallow bursts, the dilemma coiling like a serpent in her chest. Forgive the Frostfang's betrayal, bind her light to Thorn's redemption and the kingdom's fragile mending, or unleash it as retribution, shattering the hierarchies that had scarred her and claiming a war-torn freedom where no pack could touch her. The pendant burned hotter, visions flooding her anew. The Diusa's form, radiant in golden endurance, showing paths diverged, one of union, where light wove packs into a tapestry of healed souls, the other of solitude, her glow dimming in endless wilds, the realm crumbling into eternal frost. She raised her hands, the golden light surging forth in a radiant dome that enveloped the hollow, halting the advance of both packs in a hush of awe. Snowflakes suspended mid-fall, glittering like stars caught in her aura, the moonlight fracturing through them into prisms of silver and gold. "Enough," she commanded, her voice amplified by the ethereal hum, intimate yet epic, carrying the weight of her unshifted life's philosophy. "Strength is not the howl that drowns the weak. It's the choice to extend mercy when vengeance sings sweetest. I was broken by your rejections, Harlan, by your ambitions, Vargan, by the purges that deemed me unworthy. Yet here I stand, the Diusa's silent resistance made manifest. Forgive, and we rebuild the veil together. Refuse, and let war claim what compassion could save." Vargan's chains tightened as his resolve cracked, a sob escaping the traitor Alpha, his pack fracturing, some kneeling, others fleeing into the night with howls of despair. Harlan met her gaze, the enforcer's pride warring with the light's truth, tears freezing on his weathered cheeks. "You've always mended what we broke," he murmured, voice breaking, in silence, "if this is the Diusa's will." He dropped to one knee, the Frostfangs following in a wave, pelts whispering against snow. Thorn's hand found hers then, fingers intertwining in quiet union, his melancholic eyes alight with hope's fragile dawn. The love between them no longer resisted, but accepted as the forge of mutual rebirth. Yet as the light began to wane, Vargan's final snarl pierced the truce. Mercy is weakness. The void hungers for kings and their strays alike. A hidden blade flashed from his boot, arcing toward Oreth's throat in a desperate bid for chaos. Thorn lunged, taking the blow on his shoulder, blood blooming dark against the snow, his cry a visceral echo in the night. The golden thread surged instinctively from her touch, sealing the wound even as pain lanced through her. The cost of choice made flesh. Packs roared, the standoff teetering toward war once more, but Oreth's heart hardened in resolve. Forgiveness demanded sacrifice, not surrender. As the moon watched, unyielding, the ethical storm within her crested, the path to Renascimento forged in blood and light, yet shadowed by the freedom she might yet claim if compassion failed. The wind howled its approval, carrying the scent of impending dawn or deeper night. The wind's howl softened to a mournful sigh, weaving through the snow-laden peaks like the Deuce's own lament, as dawn's first blush bled across the horizon in veins of pale rose. Oreth knelt in the crimson-flecked drifts, her hands pressed to Thorn's shoulder where Vargan's blade had bitten deep, the metallic tang of his blood thick on the air, mingling with the crisp bite of frost and the faint, acrid smoke of exertion. The golden light from her palms surged forth unbidden, threads of luminescence coiling around the wound like living vines, drawing the edges together with a searing warmth that mirrored the ache in her chest. Pain lanced through her own body in echo, each stitch of healing a thread pulled from her essence, the pendant against her skin pulsing hot as a forge's heart, its gold veins flaring in rhythm with her faltering breaths. Thorn's face twisted in agony, his storm-blue eyes locking on hers, not with the king's command, but the raw vulnerability of a man stripped bare by fate's cruel mercy. Blood seeped between her fingers, warm and insistent, staining the snow in patterns that evoked ancient runes under moonlight, symbols of sacrifice, the price of bonds reforged in the crucible of betrayal. "Oreth," he rasped, voice gravel rough, laced with the melancholy that had shadowed him since exile. "Don't. The light takes from you. Let it end as it began, for me, the fallen." She shook her head, tears tracing frozen paths down her cheeks, the golden thread on her collarbone blazing like a comet's tail, illuminating the hollow in ethereal gold. The packs encircled them in a tense vigil, Frostfangs kneeling in humbled silence, their pelts dusted white, breaths fogging the air like collective prayers. Shadowclaws fractured, some fleeing into the gathering light, others collapsing under the weight of visions that exposed their rot. Vargan writhed on the ground, his form bound by fading chains of light, snarls reduced to whimpers as the Deuce's judgment hollowed him, ambition's fire extinguished, leaving only the ash of regret. Harlan stood sentinel nearby, his enforcer's gaze softened by the truth Oreth had woven into their souls, a quiet nod acknowledging the Omega he had cast out as the very salvation of their line. But within Oreth, the storm raged fiercer than the wind's dying gusts, the final choice a blade at her throat, sharper than any claw. Freedom beckoned still, a siren's call to release Thorn to his wounds, to let the packs dissolve into their wars while she vanished into the wilds, her light dimmed to a private ember, unclaimed by thrones or ties. It would be liberty's pure form, the rejection's ultimate defiance, sparing her the pain of loving a king whose decrees had scarred her world. Yet the bond thrummed in her veins, no longer resisted but embraced in the quiet hours of their refuge, the instinctive pull rationalized into something profound, a love born not of passion's blaze, but redemption's slow burn, where tenderness bloomed amid the thorns of guilt and loss. "What is strength?" she whispered, her voice intimate, trembling with the philosophy etched into her unshifted soul. "If not choosing to heal when the heart screams retreat?" The light intensified, drawing deeper from her core, her vision blurring as exhaustion clawed at the edges, the cold seeping into her limbs like the pack's old disdain. Thorn's hand rose, cupping her face with a gentleness that belied his warrior's frame, his thumb tracing the golden thread, igniting sparks that danced like fireflies in the dawn. "You've already redeemed me," he murmured, guilt's shadows lifting in his eyes, replaced by a quiet fire. The ethical king reborn, not through conquest, but compassion's forge. "If this is the end for you, know that your light mends more than flesh." The pendant hummed louder, a spiritual chorus syncing with the distant weavos that echoed from the valleys below. Packs stirring, drawn by the veils mending, the Deuce's favor returning in ripples of warmth that thawed the eternal frost. Oreth poured her will into the healing, the golden threads weaving not just Thorn's wound, but the fractures around them. Vargan's chains dissolved into purifying light, forcing him to confront his betrayals without death's easy veil, his form slumping in cathartic surrender. Eric's cuts sealed, his arrogance yielding to wide-eyed reverence. Harlan's scars, old and silvered, glowed faintly, a silent absolution for the exile he had enforced. The snow beneath them warmed, crimson blooms fading to pristine white, as if the earth itself exhaled in relief. The moon's fractured gaze above softening to a serene silver. Sacrifice crested within her then, a wave of light that enveloped Thorn fully, sealing not only his body, but the guilt that had chained his spirit, visions of burned villages dissolving into paths of renewal. Her body sagged, the glow receding as darkness nibbled at her sight, but union bloomed in its wake. Thorn's arms encircled her, pulling her against his chest, the steady thrum of his heart, a counterpoint to her weakening pulse. Love, accepted at last, was no reward, but proof, their wounds entwined, birthing rebirth from rejection's ashes. The packs rose as one, howls transforming from war cries to harmonious calls. The frost fangs and remnants of shadow claws pledging fealty not to thrones, but to the golden Luna who had chosen mercy over might. As dawn crested the peaks, gilding the snow in liquid gold, Oreth felt the Deuce's touch, a gentle veil lifting the kingdom's spiritual decay, her light the bridge to a new era. Thorn's lips brushed her temple, a vow unspoken. Together they would rebuild, his melancholy tempered by her quiet strength, her exile transmuted into destiny's crown. The wind carried the scent of pine and fresh earth, the cold yielding to spring's whisper. Blood and frost alike washed clean under the moon's benevolent watch. In that renascimento, Oreth knew peace, not the silence of solitude, but the profound harmony of souls healed, where every alpha's wound found its omega's cure and redemption's flame burned eternal. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.